Look at your hand. Whatever color your skin is today, that shade did not appear out of nowhere. It is the result of one of the longest and most remarkable processes in the entire history of life on Earth. In a sense, human skin color emerged from a silent negotiation between our ancient ancestors and the sun. And to be perfectly clear, the sun never played fair. Around 300,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens first appeared in Africa, every member of our species had dark skin. Not most people, and not almost everyone. Every single human being on the planet. Light-skinned people simply did not exist yet. Every civilization, ancient legend, cave painting, and culture we know today can be traced back to that original African population. But eventually, something happened that permanently transformed the appearance of humanity. That change became etched so deeply into our DNA that it eventually redrew the physical features of entire continents. To understand why this transformation occurred, we first need to examine what human skin actually is. We often treat skin as if it were merely the body's outer wrapping, but it is actually an organ, the largest one you have. One of its most important responsibilities is protecting the body from ultraviolet radiation. UV light behaves like an invisible attacker, breaking chemical bonds, damaging DNA, and triggering dangerous mutations. When those mutations accumulate in the wrong cells, they can eventually lead to cancer, including melanoma. This is where melanin enters the story, the natural pigment responsible for the color of your skin. Melanin is essentially sunscreen manufactured inside your own body. The more melanin your skin produces, the darker it appears, and the more effectively it blocks UV radiation before it reaches the deeper layers where your DNA is stored. Under Africa's relentless sunlight, natural selection strongly favored people with darker skin. More melanin meant fewer harmful mutations, better health, and a greater chance of surviving long enough to have children. Natural selection has never cared about beauty standards. Natural selection repeats only one question, generation after generation. Does this trait help you survive long enough to reproduce? Near the African equator, dark skin answered that question with a clear and consistent yes. But ultraviolet radiation does more than damage skin cells and DNA. It also destroys a tiny but critically important substance traveling through your bloodstream, folate, a form of vitamin B9. Folate is essential for the formation of the neural tube in a developing embryo. That fragile structure eventually grows into the brain and spinal cord. If a pregnant woman lacks enough folate during the earliest weeks, often before she even realizes she is pregnant, the neural tube may not close properly. The consequences can include severe birth defects, pregnancy loss, and other life-threatening complications. When UV radiation penetrates the skin, it can break apart folate molecules inside the body. In equatorial Africa, where early humans lived without modern clothing, permanent shelter, or reliable shade, this danger never truly disappeared. They spent much of their lives beneath intense sunlight, making folate destruction a constant biological threat. Women with lower levels of melanin lost more folate, experienced more complications, and were less likely to have children who survived. This meant two separate evolutionary pressures were pushing humanity in exactly the same direction. Melanin protected DNA against potentially cancer-causing damage, while also helping preserve the folate needed for healthy pregnancies. In Africa, dark skin was not simply a useful advantage. It was nearly essential for the continued survival of our species. So why did human skin eventually begin to change? If dark skin was such a powerful biological shield, perfected over hundreds of thousands of years, why did some populations become lighter after leaving Africa? Between roughly 70,000 and 100,000 years ago, small groups of Homo sapiens began moving beyond the African continent. This was not one dramatic migration or a single historic journey. Instead, it unfolded like a slow human tide, with each generation traveling slightly farther than the one before it. Over thousands of years, our species spread through the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and eventually the Americas. As these populations moved north, the sunlight reaching them gradually became weaker. The sun itself had not changed, but its rays struck the Earth at a lower angle, passed through more atmosphere, and became increasingly filtered. Winters were longer, days were darker, and heavy clouds could cover the sky for months. Suddenly, the dark skin that had worked like perfect armor in Africa began creating an entirely different problem. The problem was not cancer, because weaker UV exposure naturally reduced that danger. The real challenge was something completely different: vitamin D. Your body produces vitamin D inside the skin when UVB rays strike a substance called 7-dehydrocholesterol. In that sense, your skin works almost like a living solar panel. But the vitamin it produces is not optional. Vitamin D controls how effectively the body absorbs calcium, and without enough calcium, bones cannot develop correctly. In children, severe deficiency can cause rickets, bowed legs, weakened skeletons, and misshapen skulls. In women, it can soften and deform the pelvic bones, making childbirth far more dangerous and sometimes fatal. Now imagine a dark-skinned person living in northern Europe around 40,000 years ago. The melanin that had protected their ancestors so effectively in Africa now blocked much of the limited UVB light needed to produce vitamin D. Skin cannot distinguish between harmful ultraviolet radiation and the useful UVB rays the body urgently needs. It simply blocks both. Less vitamin D meant weaker bones, more deaths during childbirth, and fewer children surviving into adulthood. Evolution does not operate with sympathy, so it gradually began favoring genetic mutations that reduced melanin production. With each generation, skin became slightly lighter. This transformation did not happen because of cultural preferences, social ideas, or beauty standards. It happened because, under northern skies with limited sunlight, lighter skin helped more people survive. For many years, scientists believed this change unfolded slowly and steadily across hundreds of thousands of years. Ancient DNA revealed a much more complicated story. Europe's earliest hunter-gatherers continued to have dark skin long after their ancestors settled in northern regions. One of the most famous examples is Cheddar Man, who lived in what is now Britain approximately 10,000 years ago. A 2018 DNA analysis suggested that he likely had dark to medium dark skin, dark curly hair, and blue eyes. To many people today, that combination may seem unusual or even impossible, yet it shows that eye color and skin color did not evolve together as one simple package. The very light skin, now commonly associated with Northern Europe, appears to have spread widely only around 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. That represents less than 3% of the entire history of Homo sapiens. So what happened during that surprisingly recent period? The answer was the Neolithic Revolution, the enormous shift from hunting and gathering to farming. Hunter-gatherers consumed fatty fish, liver, shellfish, and other foods naturally rich in vitamin D. Early farming communities, however, began surviving largely on grains and other cultivated crops. As their diets changed, their vitamin D intake dropped dramatically. People became almost entirely dependent on whatever vitamin D their skin could produce from sunlight. If their skin remained highly pigmented under the weak northern sun, their bodies often could not manufacture enough. Agricultural societies were also larger, denser, and more permanent than the small nomadic groups that came before them. That difference in population structure played a major role. A beneficial mutation can travel much faster through a village of hundreds connected to surrounding settlements than through an isolated wandering band of 50 people. The combination of vitamin D-poor diets and rapidly expanding communities pushed the evolution of lighter skin into a much higher gear. But another surprising detail makes this story even more complex. Human skin color is not controlled by one single gene. Instead, it is shaped by dozens of genes interacting like different instruments inside the same biological orchestra. East Asian and European populations both developed lighter skin than people living near equatorial Africa. Yet they reached that similar appearance through different genetic variants. They followed separate genetic roads, but arrived at almost the same evolutionary destination. When evolution independently creates a similar solution more than once, it is powerful evidence that the trait offered a genuine survival advantage. The story becomes even stranger when we turn to blue eyes. According to genetic research, every blue-eyed person alive today may trace that trait back to a single ancient mutation. That mutation likely appeared in one individual living near the Black Sea between approximately 6,000 and 10,000 years ago. Before that genetic change emerged, humans are believed to have had brown eyes. Blue eyes are therefore younger than Stonehenge and possibly younger than the domestication of the horse. Skin color has shaped centuries of conflict, hierarchy, discrimination, and injustice. Yet beneath all that human history lies a biological calibration system responding to ultraviolet radiation. It is essentially an evolutionary dial adjusted by latitude, diet, and the amount of sunlight experienced by each ancestral population. Light skin is not biologically superior. Near the equator, it can create a serious vulnerability to intense UV radiation. Dark skin is not primitive or less developed. It is humanity's original condition, the biological factory setting from which every other shade evolved. Every lighter or intermediate skin tone is simply another variation built upon that ancient starting point. The sun never chose a side. It continued radiating energy without judgment, leaving natural selection to solve the biological consequences. Human societies later constructed entire racial hierarchies around what began as a practical struggle involving vitamin D, calcium absorption, folate protection, and survival. Evolution is still running today, but we have quietly rewritten many of its old rules. Supplements, sunscreen, modern clothing, indoor living, and food imported from every latitude have transformed the environment faster than our biology could follow. Every skin tone visible today represents a different version of the same answer to one ancient question. It is the answer our bodies wrote, generation after generation, in response to a star burning nearly 93 million miles away.